Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Pandemic Interviews. Glad to have you with us. Today I have the opportunity to talk to James Fox. He started and runs a company called Dawnrunner. James is an actor, a writer, a producer, and a director. James, thank you so much for taking time to talk to all of us. James, thank you so much for joining me at the Pandemic Interviews. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you too, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
No, I just want to jump into this because you've got so much experience in so many different things that I'm always fascinated to hear the stories that you've got, the things you've done, and I know everyone else will. But my first question is, what got you into wanting to be a filmmaker?
It's kind of a loaded question. How much time do we have? Yeah, so I kind of stumbled into filmmaking accidentally. I kind of accidentally landed a lead role in a feature film and fell in love with the whole process. The acting part was really, really tough. One of the toughest jobs I've ever had. So I have a lot of respect for people who do it day in and day out. But I loved the director's job. I loved that he got to tell stories and just how he kept it all, in his head active. So yeah, and then the why, I grew up really wanting to do some good in the world, to try to help people. I initially went into kind of a genetic engineering background because I wanted to try to cure cancer. That was, remember as young as like 7 or 8, like that's what I wanted to do. When people asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be a scientist and I want to cure cancer. So I wasn't cut out for a lab though. It was much too lonely for me. So I'm much too social, I guess. But yeah, so that was one thing. And then I grew up reading novels, Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. I read, Before Worlds Collide and the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant Unbeliever, and all these just like great, sweeping epics. And in my head, I'm watching the movie, and I remember trying to share with some of my friends who weren't as big into books as I was, and talking about it and sharing these stories. And they were like, I had one friend in particular who was like, I'll wait for the movie to come out. And, so I grew up with kind of like a longing to share these stories with people, and quickly realized that, movies and television shows were the easiest way to do that.
A friend of mine or a friend of a friend went to watch Passion of the Christ. And my friend, when his friend was telling him about it, goes, yeah, I don't need to go see it. I read the book. The guy goes, there's a book?
Oh my God. That's what I'm saying, right? That's like, you could leave this part in because like, that is just like perfect analogy for it. I had almost the exact same experience happen with Game of Thrones, where, I was like, well, I still hope George R.R. Martin finishes the books. And my friend goes, wait, there's books? And I was just like, oh, you're killing me.
Yeah, I grew up with all those books in high school as well.
Yeah.
Yep. When you went to school for film, what do you find the most rewarding about the art of filmmaking?
Rewarding about the art specifically. It is uncanny to visualize something in your mind, or work with somebody who has a story that they have in their mind, and it's on paper, and that's cool, and then translate it with 50 or 100 other people into something real, right? Where there's real people doing the things that you were just dreaming about them doing. That is such a rewarding experience to first of all, to have that many people believe in your story and believe in what you're doing. That's incredible right there. And then to create this make-believe world where everybody gets to kind of like have fun together in this world. It's kind of like the next level of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like, I mean, I grew up playing D&D, and it's like taking that to the next level. It's like, okay, guys, here's the campaign. Let's have fun, So for me, like the first time I, hired a real actor and sat down and had like a real experience directing, um, I was hooked. I knew I was hooked because it was just really fun to have them turn around and be like, "How was that?" It's like perfect. It was perfect. You
Nice.
are the character. Let's keep going. Um, so yeah, I think that would, if I had to like pin it on like the one thing that was the most rewarding, it would be that.
Nice. When you were started talking and answering that question, my mind went straight to this is like the earliest version of a 3D printer.
It really is. I
We
mean,
take something
yes,
off the page and make it 3D.
yeah, and it not so far in that you can like hold it in your hands. Like when you create a film, like there's not, it's still pixels on a screen, right? But like it's as close as you can get to that without actually like creating the 3D printed film, right? Like it's a
The
real
hologram.
tangible thing that you can share with your family, share with your friends, share with the world. Um, and I mean, it's fun. It's so fun. It's addictive.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you started off because you accidentally landed a role in a picture.
Yeah.
How do you find that working in front of the camera has helped you to be better at working behind the camera?
I mean, a lot of ways, but the two biggest ones I think would be I've got so much respect for actors because it's a tough job. I hear people, and I try to correct these people as often as I can. I hear people talk about how like, oh, being an actor is easy. I'd love to be an actor. It's so easy, and it's like, no, it's actually a horribly challenging job. I jumped out of a helicopter hovering 15 feet over a pond carrying a really heavy machine gun, and I didn't have any experience with that. There was no safety equipment. It was just like, all right, you ready? And I'm like, no, all right, and there we go. I've never run so much in my life, and I was an athlete when I was younger. So it's a really really tough job. And on top of doing all those things, you have lines to remember,
Yeah.
and you have like characters to like keep track of, and it's a very complex job, and it takes a very special person to be able to do that work. I was not very good at it, so I should preface everything that I talk about my acting with I was not very good at it. I'm much better behind the camera, but in ways that it helps me direct. I won't ever ask an actor to do something that I haven't done myself or wouldn't do before they tried it. So, I think there are a lot of times directors kind of, they ask a lot and they don't realize how much they're asking because they're so in their head that they don't realize that jumping out of a helicopter with no safety equipment is
Yeah.
crazy, and most people wouldn't do it. I don't recommend doing that, by the way, just for anybody listening. Don't make your actors do it either. Safety equipment is very important. Um, so, so for me, it's a respect, it's a give and take. Um, I need to give the actors the room to be their characters. I'm not a militant director. I don't sit there watching the lines, making sure it's exactly the way that I want. My job is to create a character that the actors resonate with and can become. And then when they tell me, "Hey, I'm feeling like I should be doing this," it's my job to respect that and collaborate with them and build the world together. So, and I think that coming from a production that I acted in that was extremely militant, uh, and the director had a very clear vision of what he wanted. And every time I flubbed a line, it was like reset, and I was like, God, I got to run 50 meters in full Vietnam era gear in the 115-degree heat with explosions going off all around me again because I missed come on, man, um but I respected that he wanted it his way, and that was great. That's not my style. And I think that allowing actors to have the freedom to explore is I don't know, I think it's fun. I don't think it's better. I just, for me, it's a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, for a while, you ran a summer camp for kids that taught the art of film. Uh, what was that called? And can you tell us what did you teach the kids in that class about film work?
I don't know that we ever actually landed on a name. We called it Film Camp, and it was part of the Starting Arts program. It was our summer film camp. And what we taught them was filmmaking top to bottom. I mean, we taught them everything from how to wrap electrical cables properly, like film set properly, all the way up to high level creation of scripts and characters and directing, acting, editing, visual effects. Yeah, we basically produced short films and a feature film with them over the course of a summer. So the short films were, I think, a 3-week camp, and then the feature film was a 6-week camp. So, you know, over the course of 6 weeks, we taught them all the crew positions. We taught them how to act. They were extras and, you know, lead roles, and you know, it was a grueling, very challenging schedule, but it was super fun, and we had a great time with it. The Darkest Matter, the film that we did, the feature film that we did with them, we shot entirely on green screen psych, which has its own challenges. Then a bunch of kids on set too. It was fun. It was really, really fun. I did not sleep a lot in those 6 weeks.
I think it was W.C. Fields that said, "Never work with children and animals."
Yeah. I don't know who said it, but I disagree. I had a lot of fun with acting with kids, and the energy that they brought. I mean, if ever there was an actor who was willing to just go full on character, it's kids.
What an amazing opportunity for those kids, though, to not only get to go to summer camp, but to learn something and be a part of something like that. And that's something that they'll never forget, regardless of what they do from that point on.
Yeah, I mean, several of them went on to film school and are working in the industry now. So, you know,
That's fantastic.
yeah.
Now, you and I actually met because you brought me on to do some fight choreography. These are my memories of the choreography for the fight from Terra. I had an amazing amount of time to work with the two main actors, and I put together this pretty tremendous fight. Two people with lots of movement and very action-packed inside a building. And then I drove out to meet you and the crew at set, and we find out we're outside. And now I'm looking at a field that, and I had incorporated walls into my fight choreography. And now I'm in a field, so there's no walls. It's like, okay, I can do this. And then I remember you walking back over the hill with Jeff to meet me. And you go, "Hey man, we were just walking around and we found a river. I'd kind of like to fight in a river. How do you feel about that?" Well, I've fought in rivers before, so I understand how the current and the rocks. Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Give me a couple minutes. Let me change it around. And then here's what I remember too is, great. And we'd like to add some more people. So my 2-person fight inside a building went to, I think it was 11 or 12 people outside in a river.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the challenge of putting it together. And I think I had 20 minutes to alter that fight before we started filming.
I'm surprised that we are friends, Stephen.
I love that challenge, to be honest. That's the best part about fight choreography for me, is the challenge of, okay, here's what we're going to do. Now, remember all that? Now we're going to take out these 2 elements and add these 3 elements.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
give me a few minutes.
And that's acting too. It was hard on the actors too. You know, I mean, they had worked with you. They were ready to go. They had the set. Everything was cool. They felt safe. Wait, hold on. Here comes the director. That's all gone. You know, I was unkind, but it was, I think for the shots, it was worth it. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there's that one move that you incorporated with the water where they like use the tip of the sword to like splash water up into the face, and they like move back, you know. And if you remember right, when we actually did that whole scene, Shane had just had eye surgery. So he was like, I can't get water in my eyes or anything. And still, like, you know, just like, we were already set, like everything was set up, ready to go. And he like comes up and he tells me, he's like, hey, you know, I just had eye surgery. I can't get anything in there. I run the risk of getting an infection. And I'm like, oh God, I can't change it on Steven again and go back up the hill. You know, the cameras are set. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? And he's like, no, I'm cool. I just, I wanted you to know. And we had just talked about like the splash sequence. I was just like, oh God, what am I doing to these poor people? But everything went smooth. We planned around it. Everything was great. And there we go.
Yeah, the two things I remember, I mean, it was a great day. I had so much fun being creative with you. But the two things I remember a lot are Shane's stability, laying there dead at the end of the fight with blood running right past his eye, and he never twitched. Just his professionalism.
It was
And
really uncanny.
and the other one was poor Katie in the river.
Oh yeah, that one. I tell that story pretty regularly too. Yeah, just make sure you yell "cut" really loudly.
Which, if for those watching who would be interested in that story, that's something that can be followed up on either with myself or with James. And if you want a completely different side of the story, with Katie.
Yeah, I would love to expand on that because there's a lot of lessons to be learned just in that one sequence of shots.
Yeah.
Uh,
When you were in school for film, and you were not just making them, but doing all those other things, was action acting ever covered? And did you do that kind of thing? I mean, other than jumping out of a helicopter with a machine gun.
well, I mean, yeah, but that wasn't even in school, so not explicitly. We did have a stunt day where we talked about stunts, and we talked a lot about the paperwork required to protect a production in stunts, and the importance of a fight choreographer and a stunt coordinator. And we're really warned off of doing kind of stunts on our own for our own student projects and stuff. So there was that, and then to a certain extent we talked about action for the camera and the cinematography classes, but I mean we grazed the surface at best. We kind of it was more of a warning shot than it was anything else. So the in a nutshell, no.
Okay.
I learned more working with you that day, that first day that we were out on set together, than the sum total of my film school experience. And that's not to diminish the film school experience at all. It just I don't think they have the right courses there. And I can kind of understand why from a liability standpoint. I mean, you certainly don't want a bunch of kids using wire rigs and setting off explosions and doing stunts with weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
Although I do think having some kind of like specialty class with a guest instructor would be huge, because it is a totally different ballgame.
You have done quite a bit of stuff on all aspects. And this is just for my own edification. You as a director, as a producer, what do you think about the fact that stuntmen don't get anything they don't get any love in the Oscars or anything?
I think it's crazy. I mean, we've talked about this, a couple times, kind of roundabout before. I think it's kind of nuts. I mean, take any film, any action film, any adventure film, like most films have some kind of stunt in them, some kind of fight. Maybe some of the best films have fights. Take that away. Take away Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker having their epic fight there in Empire. Like, remove that. There's no fight choreographer. We don't have that fight anymore. You lose so much just with that one scene. So I think fight choreographers and stunt coordinators, like, they bring so much to the table. It's appalling to me that they don't get more love.
Speaking of action, there's something that I think a lot of people don't know, is that you were involved with a jousting group when you were younger.
Yeah, I was. Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about that and how?
How? Oh man. So I can't remember names because it's been like 30 years ago now, but maybe not that far. Definitely 25. Uh, but I met an individual who was part of um, the Renaissance Festival troupe, the Knights of the Azure Cross, and yeah, God, I can't remember his name. He was a professional Santa. That's all I remember.
Oh, that's
And so yeah, met him. He was a great guy. We got to talking, and he said that he was part of a Renaissance guild, and I was like, oh man, I've always wanted to sword fight. And he was like, well, we do that. You should come check it out. I was like, okay. So I went to a Ren fair, and I think I'd been to Hanford Ren Fair a couple times, and it was really cool, but I didn't really know how to get involved, and um, I was a little bit shy, a little bit reluctant. I already had a very full schedule in high school. I was kind of very involved in a lot of stuff. So I was reluctant to really kind of add more to my plate. But this was like senior year or the year right after. I was like starting junior college or something. And he connected me to Cliff and who kind of like led the charge as far as jousting training and ground pounding, the hand-to-hand combat. And we were like, well, let's give it a go. So I went out to his ranch, and I'd grown up with horses, so it actually helped break a few horses and stuff when I was younger, and nicely, the nice humane way, no whipping or mistreating. And so I took to the jousting really fast just because I was familiar with and comfortable with the horses. And that was so much fun. So much fun. I had so much fun with those guys. I got tired of doing the jousting and wanted to learn more of the sword fighting, so I did some of the ground pounding with Andy. And yeah, I got to travel around with him and do some fun stuff. And speaking of addicting things, I mean, hearing the sounds of swords connecting is still something that like haunts my dreams. Every time I hear that sound, I get a chill. It's pretty fun. I don't know. I
I
like it
can't
a lot.
argue with that.
It's pretty fun.
Now, you've written a script called Soul,
Yes.
and that script has won several awards. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about Soul and what it is and how you came up with the idea?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's been nominated something like 30 times. It's
Wow.
won 15 or 16 awards now.
Oh,
Some really
congratulations.
big awards that have been, just incredible to win. I was sitting in an audience at Script Summit, actually, surrounded by just incredible talent that I'd gotten to meet. I got to read some of their scripts even. And I was like, there's no way I'm winning. So I was just there to support them. And then they called my name, and I was like, really? So yeah, it was it's been a fun ride. And the concept was I was talking with a buddy who served in the military, and he was telling me about a lot of the bureaucracy that the soldiers have to basically deal with, the repercussions of the bureaucracy in the modern military. And some of the things that he told me were just nuts, were just crazy. And I was like, wow, I cannot believe that happens. So I started kind of thinking about us telling this story and trying to share this the some of the hardships that soldiers have to put up with, and the idea that politicians in Washington who, by and large, I mean, not all of them, but by and large, haven't stepped foot on a battlefield, some of them never held a gun, are making decisions for people who are under fire and lives are at risk. It kind of crystallized for me in a moment. It's like, wow, that's actually kind of odd that that's happening. Why are those people making the decisions for whether these people live or die or what happens? So, and not to politicize it, it's just kind of an interesting conundrum. It was like, wow, that's kind of weird. So as I do, I kind of set it in a futuristic setting because it was I find that people are kind of more open to weird ideas if it's set in the future, because who knows what the future holds. And started kind of coming up with this idea of a civil war that was sparked out of selfishness and greed, and that no real reason for it other than somebody needed more money, and in a setting where technology has advanced so far that millions of people can die in an instant. It winds up being kind of a very dangerous, dark, and gritty story. So
Yeah.
it follows a wide range of characters on both sides of the conflict. You're never really explicitly told who the good guys or bad guys are. You kind of have to come up with that on your own, and that's intentional. It's kind of a some people I think are going to root for one side, and some people are going to root for the other side. So it's been a lot of fun to develop, and talking with scientists and researchers and doing a lot of like military talking with a lot of military representatives. Like I've really been trying to get like the true voice of like what a dark military operation in the future would look like. That's been super fun.
So you say you've talked with all these professionals and you've talked with scientists. So that means you're trying. What are you trying to do for the reality of this? You're trying to keep it as realistic as possible.
Yeah. So I mean, we've gone to great lengths to do research on how massive fleet-on-fleet combat in space would actually look like for humans. Most of what you've seen in movies and TV shows is not really accurate, but it's cinematic, right? And that's important. What we're trying to do is we're trying to keep it cinematic, but actually like show you what it would look like. What would the equipment look like? One of my first, just as a quick example, I was talking to a researcher out of Berkeley, and I was talking about drones and the whole like concept of like unarmed vehicles, right, or unmanned vehicles. And he was like, well, that's great now, but technology is going to catch up where people are going to be able to hack them just as quick as they are launched, basically. And you don't want your entire military to be unmanned, because now all of a sudden your military is bombing your own cities. And I was like, wow, that's actually interesting. So in the world of Soul, the whole like electronic countermeasures and electronic warfare is actually kind of like layer one of any conflict. There are entire divisions dedicated to electronic warfare and electronic countermeasures. So so you still have manned pilots, but it's very heavily AI assisted, and you've got like banks and banks and banks of people that are doing the ECM warfare, and it's interesting. So yeah, trying really hard to stay very realistic and try to stay true both to the kind of contemporary military voice. One of the things that I found with stories is like military stories are kind of true regardless of the setting. They're very similar. I mean, if you watch Band of Brothers, you watch Battlestar Galactica, or Saving Private Ryan, like if they're trying to tell a true military story, they're kind of almost the same tone. It's just the settings around them are different. So I try to do the same thing. I try to stay like similarly toned, where you could put jackets on these troops and put them in the Chesapeake Bay and have it be a Revolutionary War story. That's the take away the technology in the setting, and it should read the same, right?
So ultimately, with all this AI and all this computer assisted and all of these things, it's still about boots on the ground and the individuals that are going through the day-to-day grunge, grime, and terror.
Yeah, absolutely. And not knowing what they're fighting for, brother fighting brother and sister fighting sister, and just like lots of questions, right? Lots of soul searching, lots of like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Especially when it's a civil war and you're fighting your own people, like that's very hard. That's a very challenging thing. So, but then at the end of the day, having a job to do, and having to live with what that job is.
One of my favorite movie lines is from Hacksaw Ridge, when they're about to go back up onto the ridge, and Private Dawes finishes praying, puts his helmet on. The captain looks at everybody, says, "All right, gentlemen, let's go to work." And this is how many times they went up onto this ridge, and right, guys, let's go to work.
Right.
It's a different mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've tried to make it kind of far sweeping. So it's POVs from the story are everything from the private first class that's doing his first orbital drop into a hot zone and is nervous and freaking out, to the lifelong soldier general who is receiving orders that he doesn't agree with but has to execute, and is grappling with the whole idea of the conflict, right? Like he's got kind of more information, and still doesn't agree with what's happening, but has to encourage his troops to do the job. So just like you said, let's go to work.
Sounds like just the layers of this show would, I know I'd watch it every day, every time it came on.
Well, thanks. It's I like it. I think it's fun. I'd watch it.
Speaking of shows, you and I got to work on a show called Dorkcore. I did
Yeah.
the fight choreography for you. I had such a great time, worked with so many fantastic actors. One of them that I just did an interview with, Vinny Gustafaro. Um, can you tell us a little bit about Dorkcore, what the concept of it is, and how you got involved with it?
Right. So Dorkcore is this amazing story and setting, that is basically like, what if magic existed in the world? So it's kind of this alternate reality story of magic exists. Minotaurs are working at Starbucks. There's wood elves walking around as lumberjacks, and just it's taking like today modern times and saying, okay, everything advanced exactly the same way it did, but all of these fantasy elements exist too, right? So there's magic, there's different fantasy races, there's dragons, and there's this whole idea of the questers and questnet that that is like a job. You go in and register with questnet and you become a quester, and you go out on these quests and you fight the dragon or whatever. So the the so that's kind of the premise. And then Daryl Gabonia, who is the writer and director of what we did there for the Dorkcore pilot, he's such a great writer when it comes to comedy. It's just his pacing and joke delivery and everything is just so perfect that it's written as a comedy, and it's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially like working with Vinny, and what Vinny brought to the table with Morningside, his wizard character, which is kind of like like an alternative crack smoking Gandalf. It was great. I had so much fun on that set. We got to shoot in Hawaii, which and that was working with you was amazing. And you bring an energy, Stephen, to the table that is just so unique. And I've done this to you on everything that we've worked on together. I think where in our first thing, we had planned this whole fight. It was on this flat ground. You had this whole thing set up, and then I'm like, hey, you know what? I found this really great creek down the way, and I'd love to fight in it. And it's all pebbly and ankle deep water and cold, and you're like, I need 5 minutes.
That's one of my favorite stories. I love telling that when I talk about fight choreography.
Me too. It's like, here's what not to do. Here's how not to treat your fight choreographer.
Yeah, it
But
went
Dorkcore was
from,
the same thing. It was like, well, what kind of ground are we going to fight on? I have no idea. And it wound up being kind of craggy, weird, volcanic ground with slick moss and grass. And I mean, it's a very interesting thing.
and we even got to use some of the terrain itself for part of the gigs in the fight choreography for the strangulation of one of
Yeah,
the characters.
yeah. So Dorkcore was super fun, and I'm hoping it goes places, because it's a really fun world. I think that everyone kind of has a little bit of fantasy fatigue right now from all the fantasy shows that have been playing for the last decade. So a show like this that is kind of poking fun at the genre while also, like, respecting it,
Yeah.
is you know, it's like the comedy version of it. You know, everything that we're thinking while we're watching some of these other fantasy shows is what Dorkcore is. You know,
Nice.
it's you know, I wonder what kind of coffee a fairy drinks. You
Yeah.
find that out. You know.
I hope that goes places too. I'd love to do more work with you and Daryl on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But actually, that brings up you're good at these segues. You just set up a partnership with the Sport of Acting with Vinny Gustafaro. What is that partnership, and what are you guys doing?
Well, Vinny is such a talented actor. Just, I mean, people talk about chops, right? And I feel like that term gets kind of bandied about pretty like freely. Vinny's got chops.
Yeah.
I watch him work it, and it's just impressive to watch him work his improv abilities, his ability to spin something really quickly, where like he'll do something and the director will be like, you know, Daryl would be like, I'm looking for something kind of more like this, or I think your character would kind of be feeling this way, and he's like, got it, okay, let's go again. So you know, that's kind of the and it's kind of why I like any chance I get to talk about Vinny and the Sport of Acting, I do. And it's an incredible thing to be able to offer something as profound as Vinny's tutelage in acting. And I've actually sat in a couple of his classes, and you know, I went to the first one. I forgot how bad LA traffic was, so I went to the first one, and I was super late. And I just have to share this story real quick. So I'm like showing up like halfway, and I had every intention of asking him if I could like jump into the class and like do some like improv work or whatever. And everyone was so good, and it was so intense that it intimidated the hell out of me, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I just sat there and was just stunned the whole time. I was like, this is like freaking class. So I kind of, you know, they were like, you know, how was it? I was like, oh my God, it was incredible. So, you know, I think that, so, you know, in this partnership with the Sport of Acting, you know, one of the things that we're really wanting to do is I try to recommend it basically every step along the way. Anybody, I meet a lot of like young actors, you know, even through like casting auditions or whatever, who, you know, I had one auditioner, you know, pull me aside afterwards and was like, what did you think of my audition? I was like, I don't really like to talk about it. And they're like, well, I'm trying to get better at it. And I was like, well, here's some of the things you did that were like just technically good. Here's some of the things you did that were, you know, like mediocre and areas to improve. And I was like, but if you really want to know, find this guy on my Facebook friends and friend him and look into the Sport of Acting, right? And I gave him a website and whatever. And you know, the acting is something you got to work at. You can be naturally gifted at acting, and I think that this individual in particular was like relying on innate talents, but when it came to the craft of acting, like was very raw. I mean, you could tell that they hadn't really done a lot of it, or they weren't keeping up with it. And so, you know, Vinny calls it the sport of acting, right? Because it's something you got to train at. It's something you got to work at. You know, you might be the best pitcher in the world, but if you're not practicing or not staying in shape, you know, then you're going to eventually taper off. Like, you know, natural talent doesn't carry you far. It gives you an edge initially, but it you know, it can wane as time goes on. So and you have to adapt, right?
It's like a muscle.
As roles change, as the industry changes, as the market changes, even, you know, as you age.
Yeah.
How many child actors do you see that like are doing one role in particular, and then all of a sudden they're aged out and they can't do those roles anymore, and their career just dies because they've been relying on that natural talent or focusing on the one thing instead of, you know, adapting as they go and training as they go. So, you know, I think that's one of the things that Vinny really offers with the sport of acting that is just incredible. It's incredible that something like that exists out there.
Yeah, he's an amazing artist on his own.
Yeah.
So you are a producer, You're also a director. Um, when you switch hats from director to producer, what's the difference? And I mean, we understand generally the director is the one that creates it. How does that work for producing? I mean, what's that hat involve?
So it's a question I get asked a lot, actually. So uh, the way it got described to me that I think makes the most sense. I've had two different artist analogies, right? Like, so the producer would be the person who commissions the work. You find the artist, you find the paint, you get the brushes, you buy the canvas, or you select which wall you're going to use. They put all the pieces in play that they want to try to achieve this thing that they're looking for. And then the director is the painter, right? And they're using things like the paintbrush and the paint and the medium and whatever to create this piece of art. That's kind of how I approach it. The producer is the person who's selecting the producer selects the director. So, you know, Daryl is incredibly funny and incredibly talented when it comes to timing for comedic relief. If I was going to shoot something that was really really dark and really really dramatic, you know, Daryl might not be the best director for it. He probably could do it. Daryl's a really talented guy, but if a director's reel is nothing but romantic comedies, he's probably not going to get the nod for these other things, right?
Right.
So that's not saying you can't branch out, but you know, it's something that you look for. You would not use a super soaker to paint a portrait
Yeah.
in oil paint, right? Like it's the wrong tool for the job. So I think a lot of directors get kind of this like, you know, this ego about them about how they're like, it's their show, and it's their set. Once they're on set, that's it. It's theirs. And they're the captain of the ship. But the producer is the one who purchased all the material to build the ship, hired the labor to get it crafted, launched the boat, hired the rest of your crew, you know. So there's respect back and forth. How do I manage switching hats? Not well. When I'm the director, I'm still trying to act like a producer. Not that I disrespect my producers, I don't think. You'll have to ask them. Please don't. Uh, uh, but I approach shots as, you know, how many expensive shots do I have in this shoot? Okay, well, maybe too many. I really want to do this, but maybe I need to cut over here. So I wind up thinking a lot of the things that a producer thinks, which I'm not sure if it drives the producers crazy or if it's helpful at all. You know, I'd like to think that it's being helpful, but you know, I also get told a lot. You tell me what you want, and I'll make it happen. So I think I do a lot of self-filtering, trying to get away from that a little bit and ask for more than I need. But it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
They're two totally different jobs that are focused on trying to achieve the same thing, the best possible production of whatever the content is.
That's a really good goal to have, regardless of your hat.
Yeah.
What do you find is some of the differences between working on a project for the small screen versus a project for the big screen?
A lot of it is the time that you have to work with, both from the like deliverable, right? Like with Dorkor, I think it was a 30-minute time slot we were kind of aimed at, and or half hour episodic, and then you know, there's a 60-minute episodic as well. So you know, there's that's kind of different. You know, you're trying to jam pack all of this relevant information into this tiny little episode. But then there's also the time that you have to work in shooting. Shooting for TV is incredibly quick and very condensed. So it winds up being kind of a very high pressure shooting schedule, and you're working with multiple crews, you're working with multiple directors, and you just kind of going crazy. Whereas a feature film, a lot of them still are very high pressure, but it's a little bit different. You kind of locked into one crew, you're committed to this amount of time, and you just go. That's been the biggest difference that I've felt. I guess the other thing would be having the dedicated crew is kind of nice. Being able to get to know and rely on what people bring to the table is very cool. I mean, when you strike set for the last time and nobody wants to leave because you're all feeling nostalgic and emotional about how close you all got because you've been through hell together, a good kind of hell usually.
Yeah.
It says something about the set and what goes on there. So and film, while it has it, it doesn't have it to the intensity that features do, at least in my experience.
That's cool. That's cool. So you have the hat of producer, you have the hat of director. You're also an editor.
I edit. I wouldn't call myself an editor.
When you're editing, are there certain things that you find help you in creating the story out of all of this footage?
Yeah, I mean, what I usually look for specifically is genuine performance. I want to feel like this person is feeling something. Whether that's line delivery or body language or facial expressions or setting. For me, it's about feeling connection there. If the character doesn't feel connected, and I'd say 7 out of 10 takes are disconnected. It's everybody figuring out what they're doing in concert, and this isn't all just on the actor. This is the camera work. Did I notice the camera work in that take? If I did, I try to avoid that take, because the second I feel the camera in the shot, I'm now out of the story as a viewer. Same goes for the visual effects, same goes for the acting, the lighting, etc. So for me, it's do I feel like this is real? Do I feel like this is a genuine take?
Right.
And usually, if I can get enough of those strung together, it winds up feeling good. When you don't, it doesn't. It takes you out of the story. And the more times you come out of the story, nobody. I had an editing instructor in school say nobody likes bobbing on the surface of the ocean, right? Because you're sitting there and it's like you go under and you come up, you go under, you come up, you go under, and finally you just don't want to be in the water anymore. So that's kind of how I approach editing is.
Okay.
I want you to go under, I want you to stay under, I want you to enjoy the ride, I want you to come up and talk about
Nice. You and I have been working on a project off and on for a little while now called FIGHTCRAFT.
it. Yeah, I was hoping you'd bring that up.
Oh, yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what it is, what your goals for that are?
All right, so I want everybody who's watching to imagine Project Runway with a little bit of Mythbusters thrown in, and like American Ninja Warrior all kind of smashed together into a show that highlights fight choreography and stunt coordinators in basically a like choreographer off. If that's a word, I'm going to coin it right now. Choreographer off. Doesn't really roll off the tongue well. I'll have to work on that. But with the idea being that it's a competitive show that takes a scene, a produced scene from a movie with talent, and it builds up to the fight, and then like the record screeching ends, and then these fight choreographers have to take the tone and style of and elements of the initial seed video and finish the fight, create a fight, finish the stunt, whatever weapons, location, tone, whatever, they have to incorporate it all into a finished fight, get it made, and then a panel of judges would review them at the end and rank them according to various things. And we had safety, style, and story, right? Do they progress the story? Do they stay in the style? Do they bring an element of themselves into it without breaking the feel of the initial video? And they keep everybody safe, because the thing that is paramount to fight choreography and stunt is keeping people safe and alive.
What do you mean in the style?
So one of the things that I think is, and you know, you'll probably be able to talk to this more. One of the things that I think is very interesting about the director, choreographer, coordinator relationship is we have to determine, we have an overall look and feel for our project, for our film. Yeah, as directors, as producers, you know, we've painstakingly created this idea that we have in this world, and then we've brought in elements, DPs, gaffers, you know, whatever, to production designers, even composers and editors and visual effects companies and visual effects supervisors that are going to enhance that vision and bring that vision to life. It's also true with fight choreography. I need to find somebody who's going to be able to fit my style. You know, you go from something like Equilibrium, right, with the cool like gun kata fighting, to, you know, Pulp Fiction and kind of their fighting style and overall style of the film. Very different. And the fights need to match and need to flow in the same style as the overall film. Otherwise, it's going to feel weird, right? There'll be a dissonance between the directing from the director and the fight choreography and the choreography of the actors in the film itself. And you see this actually in film. There's been, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there's been several films where I've watched and it's like, oh wow, this fight feels very weird, you know, like it's very out of place. See it a lot in like indie film because they're kind of doing what they can with what they got, and which is great, keep doing that. But it's different when you're working with a fight choreographer, and you know, like when we're working together, it's like, well, what kind of style are we going for here?
Yeah.
You know, are we going for gritty realism? Are we going for like high fantasy? You know, even between Terra, the first project that we worked on, and Dorkcore, the fighting style was profoundly different, you know, and that had a lot to do with setting. It had a lot to do with character. It had a lot to do with a lot of this stuff. So, you know, style is very important. You have a style of fighting and combat that you like to do, but your job is also to try to integrate that as much as possible within my look and feel of the film. So that's a very delicate balance to be struck.
So would you say it's also like, let's say the competitors, they get a little bit of script, they see the actors that take it up to that point, but this time or this episode is a Tarantino episode,
Yeah,
or this episode is a Jackie Chan episode, and so it has
absolutely.
to be in it. It's the fight choreographer competitors fight that fits in the story of what they're shown, but it has to maintain the styles of other types of movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
What a challenge.
yeah, and that's the whole point, right? Is as a fight choreographer, you're going to work with a myriad of directors. You're gonna hopefully work with every kind of director there is, and it's going to be a challenge every time. You know, if you work with Quentin Tarantino, your fights are going to go down like this. Now, if you turn around and work with, you know, Christopher Nolan, it's going to be totally different fights. So, you know, you need that's the whole idea of it. Like, you need to bring your own unique style into it, but adhere to the overall look and feel and vision of the director. So, you know, with FIGHTCRAFT, every episode we would basically approach them with a different setting, right? It could be sci-fi, it could be a western, it could be contemporary military, it could be a bar fight. You know, who knows? Uh, uh, an overall style and a story, which will involve things like characters, props, lines of dialogue. You know, like you're talking about, that little like small bite-sized piece of script that they've got to execute on.
Ah, how much fun. I mean, it's like having to combine, as a fight director, something I'd love. It's having to combine John Woo style with the film setting of Walking Dead.
Oh,
just just so
print it.
messed up but fun.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
If you could create the project of your dreams, whether it's a book or a story, anything, what would that look like?
Well, odds are probably sci-fi or fantasy. Um, yeah.
Stay strong, fellow geeks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know, I've read so many incredible sci-fi or fantasy books that there's just, you know, some of which I'm actually getting to work on. You know, I just adapted a pilot for an amazing sci-fi series, the Cataclysm universe by A.K. Dubois, and it's so much fun. It's so good.
Yeah.
Deep characters and just riveting story, and I don't know, so much to play with.
I
That
enjoyed that series. It's got that combination of fantasy and sci-fi all melded together.
Yeah. So, you know, that was and I was a fan of that series before I got to work on it. So it, it was kind of like living the dream.
Yeah.
Getting to play in somebody else's universe is just as much fun as getting to like build my own. So that was a lot of fun, and I'd love to do more of that. I'd love to do more adaptations of the books that I've grown up loving, and I think that dream projects are definitely some of those.
Nice.
And Soul has kind of become a bit of a dream project for me. There's so much time invested in it at this point, and I've I've sat there and painstakingly scrubbed away at the tarnish until I've, you know, been able to stand back and say, I can't do anything else to this.
Yeah.
This is what it is. So it would be really cool to see that out there.
One of the things that has always impressed me about your work ethic and your skills is that not only are you a writer, a director, you've done acting, you've done editing, you write your own scripts, but you've also been working on a novel, right?
Yeah, yeah,
What is that?
a couple. So I'm working on the novel version of Soul, which right now is tentatively called the Soul Saga, which has been awesome. It's been kind of a unique thing to change mediums, right? Writing a script is very just action based, and you know, like trying to keep it slim and setting the director up to take it to the next level without being too crazy. Uh, and then trying to like bring that back around to like something super descriptive like a novel where you can watch the movie in your head was quite the brain workout there for a little while. But I've got a full head of steam now, and I'm chugging away on it, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. That should be wrapping up here soon. And then I'm getting to co-author a book with A.K. Dubois in the Cataclysm universe.
Oh, very cool.
And that starts up here pretty quick, and I'm just dying to get at it. I'm pretty much bother her every day. Like, let's do it. Let's get started right now.
Well, I can't wait to read these books.
There, I'll send you the first 15 chapters of Soul. You can be a beta reader.
Oh, I will
give me some feedback.
be all over that.
Sweet.
So I have one last question for you, James, and
Okay.
I can't tell you how much I enjoy talking with you. We've spent many hours just talking over the phone, over Facebook, and it's always great to talk with you. You have a couple of projects coming up.
Yeah.
I don't know what you can and can't say, but can you tell us anything about your upcoming projects?
Sure. I think everything's been announced. So I'm directing 2 feature films. I think the
Congratulations.
first, and you know, with COVID-19, everything's been a little bit interesting. You know, production's halted basically across the globe. So you know, I can't speak to dates or anything or order even, but 2 feature films written by an incredible writer, Gary Dover, really good, and Quarantine Island and Flesh Off the Grill, two horror films, which will be my first in the genre, which I was kind of nervous about at first, but both projects have just an incredible team behind them, and I'm learning so much from the team, and I feel like what we have put together as far as our development of the properties is pretty profound. I'm pretty excited about it, so I'm kind of, you know, eager to get on set and get going with that.
Yeah, that's exciting. And the horror genre has dedicated fans.
Oh yeah, Oh yeah, and with that dedication comes expectation, though.
Yeah.
So I've gotten to dig into the fan base a little bit and find out kind of what their expectations are, and there are a few like common threads that of things that the audience for horror expects and demands. So I'm excited to bring that to them in my own style.
That's going to be great. I look forward to seeing those when they come out.
I will definitely keep you informed.
So James, thank you again so much for taking time to talk with me. I always learn so much every time I talk with you. It's a pleasure.
Me too. If we're both learning, what's that mean?
That we're not dead yet.
Yes, I like it. We'll go with that.
So best of luck on all the projects that you're working on. And it's going to be great to see all of them come out to fruition and just to watch your career progress.
Well, I'm looking forward to working with you on the next project we get the opportunity to. And
It'll
I
be
appreciate
fun.
you having me.
Thank you so much for the time. It was a pleasure talking with you. Stay safe. Keep your family safe. And just as important as staying safe, stay sane-ish.
Yeah. You stay safe as well, and I hope everybody else out there is staying safe.
Thank you. All the best to you and everyone.
Thanks, Stephen.
All right. Well, that was great. Thanks again, James, for talking to us. I really enjoyed catching up with you and hearing about all the wonderful projects that you're doing and what you've done. If you enjoyed watching this video, please hit the subscribe button below. Subscribe to our channel. We have lots of videos of interviews, as well as sword fighting instructional videos that you can watch and enjoy. Thanks again, everyone. Stay safe, and remember, find a way to stay sane. Soon this will be over and we'll be able to get back together.